Hi, this video is going to be a bit of a catch-all because I wanted to talk about my own food slash cooking slash health journey. So I learned to cook after I got married. So up until that time, I only knew how to make instant coffee. But after I got married and I moved to the United States, I learned how to use a pressure cooker. I learned how to identify all the dals and the lentils and the beans and how to chop vegetables in different sizes and what are the various masalas and what spices go with what kind of preparations and all of that. I learned cooking from my mom, from my husband, and from the internet. So today, what I cook is on an everyday basis is what you could call Indian vegetarian cooking. It's very hard to classify because it's not really South Indian, it's not North Indian, it's not Keralite, it's not Gujarati, but yet it has elements from all these regions. It's just vegetarian cooking, to say the least. And over these years, in my cooking journey, there have been three main changes that we've made, and which I think has been very beneficial for my husband and I. I thought I'll talk about them here. First one is the method of cooking the vegetables. So now the way I cook my vegetables is by steaming. So what I do is I chop the vegetables up, and I do this for all vegetables, hard vegetables, soft vegetables, squashes and beans and okra, eggplant, all of them. So I chop the vegetables up and I place them in the steamer, and the steamer itself is then placed in a stainless steel vessel with water in it, and then I put it on the gas and turn on the heat. And as the water boils and the steam is generated, the vegetables are cooked because of steam. So what I found is that this method of cooking results in a very even, the vegetables get cooked very evenly. Typically when you saute vegetables in a hot pan with oil, some veg pieces might get cooked more than the others because of how because of the contact with the hot pan and the oil. But in steaming, it's a very uniform kind of cooking, so all vegetables are cooked evenly. In terms of flavor, I have found that when you steam your vegetables, they retain the flavor. The flavor of the vegetables still retained. Unlike when you cook them in oil, where what you end up tasting is the flavor of the oil and the flavor of the spices. Now, in this particular method of steaming, once the vegetables are steamed, what I do is I warm a little bit of oil and I put some sesame seeds or cumin, mustard, whatever seasonings, and then I just toss that, add that to the vegetables and stir it a little bit, maybe some turmeric and salt, and that's it. So the amount of oil that is used is very less, and because of that, it's not very oily, and also the flavor that you get isn't of the oil. The flavor that you eat, the flavor that you get is the vegetables flavor, which I have found is very delicious. And up until I started cooking using steaming, I didn't even know how so many of the vegetables were actually meant to taste, because what I was tasting was not the vegetable but the oil and the seasoning, the spices. So the oil use of the oil is also much reduced than before. So that's the first one. The second change was reducing the amount of carbohydrates we consume. So previously for lunch, I would make a little bit of rice, some dal, and some vegetable. And then it was fine. The amount of rice my husband and I consumed was not much, really, very little, about one-fourth cup between the two of us. But around 3 p.m., 3:30 p.m., there would be this kind of sleepiness, a little bit of lethargy, and my husband one day suggested, let's just take the rice component out. So I said fine, and so now for a while now, for a few years now, I just make rice, as I just make dal and vegetable. So there's a good quantity of dal we consume between the two of us, and vegetables with the steamed method. And there's none of that sleepiness or drowsiness that happens in the afternoon. None of that. We feel really light and still feel very satisfied. And sometimes when I make something like a chole or like something like a sambar, then I would make rice or chapati or whatever. But for most part, when you have just a basic simple dal, moong dal, masoor dal, tur dal, whatever, there is no rice. It's just the dal and the vegetable. And I've also started to eat more complex carbs like jawar, bajri, like ragi kinds of millets, quinoa, brown rice. So when we do eat carbs, try to consume more of these carbs instead of just white rice or plain wheat. And this is something that I've really enjoyed, this particular change, because now we've been experimenting with other kinds of grains and adding more grains to our diet, and just less relying less on rice and wheat. The third change is shifting to a vegan diet. So a few years ago, my husband became completely vegan, and he was having difficulty digesting regular, dairy milk. And I also thought I would become, I thought I would go vegan too, just for convenience. And I am not allergic to dairy, and I still do cheat, sometimes when it comes to dessert. I love desserts. So I will cheat a little sometimes when it comes to dessert, but for most part, I am vegan also. And the biggest change it has made for me is that I'm a big fan of chai. So in the evening, I love to have chai, a cup of chai, with maybe a couple of biscuits or cookies or whatever. And whenever I would make chai with regular milk, dairy, it would be like a meal, because I think the dairy in the US, United States, is feels very rich. Maybe it's the way it's processed. So having a cup of chai was almost like having a meal. And then I would have to, I would eat dinner a couple of few hours later, and I didn't have much of an appetite for dinner, but I didn't want to give up my chai either. So it was a bit of, what am I going to do now? But when I moved over to using the coconut milk beverage as a substitute, now the chai is very light. It doesn't feel very rich, it doesn't weigh me down, and I still have an appetite for dinner. In any case, dinner is a lighter meal, but we eat it later in the day and we go to sleep a couple of hours or whatever after. And I don't want to go to sleep feeling weighed down. I want to feel light in my stomach. And if I don't have an appetite for dinner, I wouldn't be able to eat much. It wouldn't digest well. And I didn't want any of that. So shifting over to uh, uh, non-dairy substitute for chai really helped me in that aspect. So these are the changes we've made, and I'm not suggesting that anyone should eliminate carbs or eliminate dairy, but I think these are just experiments we can do, to see how our body responds, how our energy levels are affected, how sleep is impacted, how health is impacted, how digestion is impacted, all of that. And we can tweak as we go along. There are so many substitutes available today. If you want to reduce dairy, there's coconut milk beverage, there's cashew milk, soy milk, rice milk, almond milk. In fact, I make almond milk at home and it's really delicious, very simple to make. So there are many options out there, and we can each, all of us can experiment with all these diets and substitutions and see, how it affects our lifestyle and if it's beneficial. So, if you do end up trying any of these things, let me know. I'd love to hear from all of you. Thanks.